Welcome back. I'm Andrew Riley and this is the Evening Edition. It's that time of the night again when our special guests take us through some of the biggest stories of the day. Tonight, that's the former Conservative MP and Health Minister Edwina Currie and the author Nels Abbey. Welcome to you both.
Hi, Andrew.
Hi, Edwina.
Good evening.
Good evening, Nels. Well, very good of you to join me this evening, and lots of things to talk about. Shall we kick off with the sentencing review? That's pretty big. The mandatory chemical castration for sex offenders could become a reality in Britain, as well as thousands of prisoners being released early after serving only a third of their jail term in a bid to solve the problem of overcrowding in our prisons. Those are some of the recommendations published in the independent review led by the former Justice Secretary David Gauke today. Andrea Kumar, the chief executive of the Howard League for Penal Reform, believes that David Gauke's recommendation on chemical castration at least needs close inspection before any time of national rollout.
That David Gauke has recommended that the government look into it, and that's the extent of his recommendation to date. I think that is worth doing, but I think everybody needs to know more about it and how it's operating and the trial's operating. And the red line has to be that it cannot be mandatory. I mean, in our current human rights framework, that would be very hard to see how that could possibly be compliant with the Human Rights Act. And I'm not sure that any of us would want to see people subjected to those kind of interventions on a mandated basis.
Well, look, can I ask you in turn, so that we're not talking over each other? Edwina, is there a moral argument that forcing sex offenders, to undergo chemical castrations is wrong?
Well, I've been reading some of this stuff. When I was a Member of Parliament, I had two prisons in my constituency, and I actually decided in 1992 that no, I did not want to be the prisons minister, because whichever way you do it, it's a real minefield. It's almost impossible to get it right. And in fact, the comment we've just heard is incorrect, because what David Gauke recommends is that the current pilot scheme, which has been going on since 2007. I was a bit surprised about that. It's been going on for a long time. Should continue to have funding beyond 2026 when it was due to lose it. So he's really saying you should carry on with the work that you're doing. You should also look at the way it's run in countries like Denmark and Germany, where it's voluntary, and Poland, where it is compulsory. He doesn't use the word castration, he calls it chemical suppression, and he recognises that actually in many cases, what you're talking about is more of a power play. It's not an uncontrollable obsession. Rape is a power play between a dominant partner and somebody they're trying to bully, and that just playing around with the chemicals isn't going to hack it. On the other hand, he does say 21% of all male offenders in Britain are there for sexual offences, which was a big surprise to me. And so you can't avoid it. You actually can't avoid discussing it and thinking about how to do it. My instincts are that this is not a moral issue, Andrew. My instincts are that this is a practical matter. Does this work? Or is it better to do what I've seen done in a prison in Oxfordshire I visited once, where they were doing a lot of talk therapy and getting perpetrators to talk through what they were doing or why they were there and what the obsession was and why they did it and what they could do to control it in future. A bit like, dare I say it, a bit like a Slimming World regular therapy. But it does help people then to understand their own motives and perhaps more to take control. So if that's part of it, if taking medication of any kind is part of getting your system into some more recognisable form of normality, then we have to say it's got to be a good thing, especially when 1 in 5 offenders is in jail and has immediate custody because of some kind of sex offence.
Sure. I mean, calling it medication takes the sting out of it, if you like. Chemical castration is such an emotive term. Calling it medication gives a very different feel to it. Nels, what do you think about the moral argument? What's your view on it?
I'm rather shocked that this has been in trial since about 2007. I'm completely shocked that this is something that would be in consideration in somewhere like Britain. It feels highly illiberal. It feels highly potentially susceptible to manipulation. It feels very, very much so something that if I was told that this was something a policy that Britain was potentially going to pursue, I would laugh in the face of anybody who said so. So the idea, even when you enter the term chemical castration, the terminology itself sounds much more Saudi Arabia than it does Swindon. So I'm really and truly, genuinely surprised. And truth be told, I'll be surprised if this does become government policy, particularly under a Labour government. Reform, yeah, I could definitely see them going ahead and doing something like this significantly. I could see it being rolled out to even further than sex offenders. But at the exact same time, too, I just feel that this is something that I would be surprised if it becomes government policy. But stranger things have happened. The Labour Party is in a desperate situation where they're trying to prove themselves very tough on a range of different things, be it immigrants, be it, of course, I'm not going to link this to immigration as far as bit, but the Labour Party wants to prove themselves to be tough and to be a hard group of a hard set of people, tough on crime, not so much tough on the cause of the crime, which the key driver, the cause of crime is, of course, poverty, perhaps not sexual crimes.
No, that's nonsense. No, I don't believe that at all.
What is nonsense?
I do not believe that poverty is the main driver of crime, especially when it comes to sexual crimes.
I didn't say sexual crime. I said not include sexual crime, but poverty is the main driver of crime. But
you just say it as a matter of fact.
Well, it is a matter of fact, though. But yeah, poverty is the main driver of crime. But by all means, feel free to enlighten us otherwise.
You mean there aren't rich criminals? There are lots of rich criminals. The problems often are that we can't catch them.
No, but when you can actually name all the exceptions to the rule, it doesn't actually disprove the rule. It actually reaffirms it. The key drivers of crime.
No, it doesn't. It disproves the rule. It disproves an absolute. Going back to undergraduate philosophy. Sorry.
Well, let's get back to the sentencing review, perhaps, and perhaps come back to this later. We have to think radical when it comes to our prison system, clearly, with the jails bursting at the seams. But is releasing dangerous criminals after a third of their term, is that simply too radical? Are we chasing a reform? Is it too radical, that idea?
No, I don't think it's. I think it incentivizes prisoners to behave in a particular way. And also, too, if we can find a way we have to believe in rehabilitation. We have to believe that people who fail can be repaired, can be reformatted to do better than what they were previously. 100 years ago, a gentleman who became famous to the world known as Malcolm X was born within the last few days ago. He was a prisoner, was a pimp. He was the worst in the worst of society. He coined the phrase himself, actually, that the person with the most dangerous person in society is the person with nothing to lose. He came out of prison and became one of society's foremost brilliant people, one of the most influential people of the 20th century. I believe that people who are listening to us behind bars right now, given a second chance, given an opportunity of rehabilitation, given an opportunity to pay their debt to society, get their prison sentence cut down, and come out and do better for themselves, I think it's something that they all aspire to. And I think given half a chance, the overwhelming majority of them will live up to the expectations that society and the second chance society has given them.
Edwina, do you think that these prisoners? Hang on. Do you think these prisoners will live up to our expectations, being released early and behaving well?
Not if they're just turfed out on the street with nowhere to go and no job and no hope and no prospects, because they will almost immediately drift back to where they were. Timpsons, the
key cutters, the shoemen.
The key cutters have done a fantastic job. They actually employ hundreds and hundreds of people, and the recidivist rate amongst their people is almost negligible.
It's the same with Iceland Foods is the same, isn't it?
Yeah, there are a number. But Timpson's, and of course, James Timpson is the prisons minister, so he knows whereof he talks. And what they say is you've got to train people before they leave, and you've really got to get the people with the right attitude. But there are a lot of people who are exactly as Nels has just described. And you've also then got to get them into work. They're released at 9 o'clock in the morning. They've got to be at work immediately. You actually got to pick them up and take them straight to the place of work. I was amused to hear when I heard one of their senior people talk about this, that the only thing they don't teach them in jail is how to cut a key. They don't teach them how to be locksmiths. That's something they have to learn when they leave. So that's the sort of program. If you just release them, that's no good.
Well,
on the other hand, I reckon that we put people in jail in this country for far too long. We tend to sentence people far longer than most other countries. I did a bit of research on my family going back 100 years or so, and it turned out we had quite a lot of criminals in Liverpool in those days, including some people who were related to me. And
might there be a relationship between poverty in Liverpool and actual and criminality in Liverpool also too? It's not that there's nothing terribly bad about
there
Liverpool
are no
whatsoever.
excuses.
Liverpool's
the whole point. No,
Please,
the whole point about this, and I think the difference in our approach to this, which is worth debating endlessly, is that I think people have to take responsibility for their actions, and it's enormously helpful if we can assist them to take back control of their own actions and their own lives. And that's what people like Timpson are able to do. But I was going to make a slightly different point, that 100 years ago, the shame of being sent to jail for 3 months for what we would regard as quite serious offence of robbery or beating somebody up in the street, which people would be sent down now for several years. But the shame of being sent down for 3 months, of having that on your record, was probably enough to keep people on the straight and narrow from there onwards. Most people in poverty, Nels, are not criminals. It's not a direct link.
There's a direct no. Most people in poverty are indeed not criminals. Most criminals come from poor backgrounds. That's the key point I'm making here.
Most court criminals come from poor backgrounds.
Yeah, absolutely. That I can't disagree with the slightest bit. I can't disagree with this. There's no disagreement here whatsoever in regards to that. But I do feel that us as a society move into a more compassionate and a second chance giving society, and giving people an opportunity to dream of a better tomorrow. That you're caught in a cage effectively for years or however long, and then getting that chance to come out, earn a decent living, earn qualifications. And the stigma of going to prison exists today as much as it existed 100 years ago. It's just that the desperation of people has increased today. The desperation 100 years ago was just as vast or so, but the stigma also now is vast because people can just Google your name and you get into a lot more. It limits your opportunities and potentially put you on the track to reoffending, which is just wrong. It's a waste of human potential.
Listen, I was just going to add to that, if I may, Andrew. One of the key things that is in the Gork report that I totally agree with is beefing up the probation service. Mm-hmm. And the point he makes is we can't build our way out of this, and I think that's absolutely right. There's a number of things that we can do to reduce the pressure on the kind of inpatient stays, as it were. Such things as actually putting money back into the justice system so that our courts are working much more quickly. It shouldn't take a year to get a case to court. My criminal relatives were in court the next day just about, and they then were straight into jail, and 3 months later they were out and hanging their heads in shame. And we need to get back to some kind of speedy justice, which is much better than what we're providing at the moment.
I think we'd all agree with that. Edwina, we would all agree with that. Where's this money coming from? We need more court buildings, we need more barristers, we need more defence solicitors, but where's all the money coming from for all this legal aid?
The most expensive thing you can do with somebody is keep them in jail. So the quicker you actually get them out of jail, the quicker you get people who are on remand into court and serving their sentences, the quicker you can actually release people to the care of the probation service and make sure they don't go back. The more money you're going to save.
So, Nels, would you I was going to say, would you vote for more money for the court system, Nels, or would you vote for more money for defence? We've been discussing that tonight.
I would vote for more money for prevention than I would the cure in the situation over here. As I've said before, I know Edwina completely vehemently and strongly disagrees with me, but the key driver of crime, as demonstrated by many studies, is poverty. And I think that the more we could do to alleviate poverty in society, the more we'll see criminality drop, and therefore we'll see a drop in our prison population too.
Nonsense. We're richer than we have been ever in our history, and we've got more prisoners.
We're more unequal than we've ever been in our history too. So if you take a look at it, so inequality and poverty are twins. They're two sides. They're twins. They come with each other. So what you then see in this society, a highly capitalist society, in which what you have is a demonstration of who you are. Also, you therefore push people who are increasingly in poor situations to go out and take significantly lopsided risks to acquire more, to prove themselves to be somebody in society. And that sometimes leads them into serious, significant trouble.
Round 2 of Edwina v. Nels in a few moments.
Local, national, global, there's all
on Times Radio.
Round 2 of Edwina v. Nels. The topic now is the 4% pay rise for doctors and teachers. About 2 million NHS staff and teachers in England have received a 4% pay rise, which is slightly above inflation levels so far this year. But is this just the start of what's to come? Public sector unions are threatening further industrial action this summer. Professor Philip Banfield, chairman of the BMA Council, told Times Radio's John Pienaar what they were expecting from today.
What we were expecting was something that provided the commitment to restore the lost pay of doctors. This isn't about a pay rise. This is about restoring the value of doctors' pay to the level of 2008, which is still about 25% behind. And of course, the consequence to that is that our doctors are voting with their feet and either working abroad or leaving the NHS altogether.
I think in common with hundreds of thousands of people across the UK, the heart's sinking slightly at the prospect of another medical strike. Edwina, should teachers and doctors relent and accept this pay offer? After all, it is above inflation, 4%.
Of course they should. Of course they should. I mean, when it comes to teachers, if teachers go on strike, all they are doing is teaching the kids that aggression and that kind of direct action might actually work instead of reason and debate and discussion, the sort of thing that we've been demonstrating here on Times Radio tonight. It's a deeply awful thing, I think, for teachers to go on strike because of the lessons that the kids then learn, and of course the damage it does to their education. When it comes to doctors and other people in the health service, I just wonder why they want to be doctors. You know, is it just for money? They are phenomenally well paid. A lot of the doctors, and certainly the GPs, the ones that we would all like to see, are on substantial sums of money. They're one of the causes of the inequality that Nels has been talking about. Public, where I live up in the Peak District in the north of England, it's public sector workers like the doctors who are amongst the best paid of all. And the idea that you go on strike, every time the BMA talks about this, they move back the point at which they're making a comparison of having suffered so badly from inflation. It goes further and further back. I mean, that union guy mentioned 2008. That's way back at the time when, Gordon Brown was the Prime Minister. If you go really far back, maybe you could do even better than that. The problem is, I think, that these unions have been taken over by some serious activists. If I were Keir Starmer and Pat McFadden, I would be plotting and making sure that actually some of our supporters were in there standing for election in these unions and getting them to see sense in future. And I'm saying that as a Tory.
Nels, what do you think? Should teachers and doctors relent and accept this pay offer?
I don't think so. No, I think that they should. I think that the lesson, if we follow Edwina's thinking to logical conclusion, if we're looking at what the teachers are teaching students by going on strike, it's teaching them to stand up for yourself. It's teaching them that, look, it's teaching them you have to stand up for yourself, that if you don't stand for anything or so, you'll fall for anything. If you don't stand up for your pay or so, you'll find that your pay is being cut in real terms since 2008. It must be very clear here. 2008, for example, is about 17 years ago right now. And we as a society are still holding the bag for it. The teachers paid for it. The doctors paid for it. The dustmen men in places like Birmingham, so on and so forth, also paid for it. Whereas quietly, the Royal Bank of Scotland, which is now known as RBS, has quietly returned to private ownership. The bonuses have returned. The culture of excess and excessive risk-taking has returned. And I'm not saying this as some layperson. I'm an ex-banker myself. In fact, if you look at the actual pay of junior doctors' pay ranges between £32,000 and £63,000. I was earning significantly more than that as a year 2 free banker. Didn't do anything. I did do as a year 2 or year 3 banker, meaning that in my second or third year, I was earning significantly more than, say, a junior doctor would do. And I just had an undergraduate degree and a couple of post-graduation qualifications. So it didn't mean that I was doing anything better for society. It just meant that at the time or so, I was, for whatever reason happened or so, I was in a place where we were rewarded significantly more. But the doctors, the teachers, the dustbin people or so, the cleaners, everybody else, they did a significantly more for our society than people like myself did at the time. And I think that the way in which we have treated them, the way in which we've allowed their pay to subside, the way in which we're somewhat dismissive of their concerns or so, has to stop. Now, these are what we could describe as key workers, and we must treat their salaries as key to our economic engine and to our economic growth and to our future as people, both in terms of our health and the education of our young and our cleanse and the sanitation of our society too. So yeah, stand your ground, teachers, doctors, bin men, Birmingham, whoever else. So the overwhelming majority of Britain stands right beside you.
I think we'd have to have a poll on that one, I think. But anyway, there's certainly the spectre, the return of the magic money tree. There is an element of that. How much of a concern is it that some of this pay rise money, the government has admitted, will have to come from existing NHS and schools budgets? So, paying Peter to pay Peter sort of thing, borrowing from Peter to pay Peter. Some of these pay rises will come from school budgets and NHS budgets.
Well,
how is that helping?
What we'll end up with, and this has already been commented on, is if the school budgets don't go up by the same amount, bearing in mind that, of course, they're having to find the extra for the higher minimum wage, the extra national insurance in many places as well. Not the NHS, but a lot of the schools are having to do that, and nurseries and so on. Then what you do is you cut your budget, you cut your employment, and the people that you will lose will be the lowest paid workers like your classroom assistants. And who's going to suffer from that is going to be your children with disabilities and special needs. So there's a problem there. And the government has got a big problem. I felt in the last year or so that Keir Starmer felt that he was still fighting the election even after he won it. Now you're in charge, and now the sums don't add up. Because even if you put up taxes as they are doing and more money comes in, as is the case, including from better paid doctors who now are well into the highest of the pay, the tax rates, it's still the case that there's a hell of a gap between what we're spending and what's coming in. And that is the dilemma it faces, not just this country, but it faces a lot of Western countries. It certainly faces the United States, even under Trump. And it's because we have said yes, along the really sweet, heart on sleeve lines that we just heard from Nels. And then we look at the sums and there's a gap, and the gap is expensive and growing. The biggest budget in the government is actually the cost of servicing the debt. And it's one of the reasons why I think this government and Rachel Reeves, bless her socks, are really scratching their heads about what to do. But I go back to the initial thing that I said, Andrew. What kind of people are we recruiting to be doctors whose most important issue is standing up for themselves and demanding more money when they're already amongst the best paid people in our entire society? Yeah, maybe they can't compete with bankers, but they can compete with just about everybody else living down the street where I live in Manchester or near Manchester. They are amongst the best paid. They work from home. You can't get an appointment. You wait months for an appointment to see a GP. The waiting lists in hospitals are coming down, but there's still many, many millions. And it's mostly old people who are suffering.
Nels, you talked earlier about it was fair for teachers and doctors to be paid properly for their work. But nurses are only going to be paid 3.6%, not the 4% that doctors who are already better paid are going to be offered. So that doesn't seem fair on the face of it. What do you think about their offer?
If memory serves me right, I think the nursing union did actually win a concession for nurses that exceeded that of doctors a couple of years ago. I might be wrong on that. I can't remember the exact details of it, but I do remember something like that. But also, too, of course, nurses too. I have of course, coming from a British Nigerian / Ghanaian background or so. Of course, there's nurses in my family, and my sister-in-law's listening to this right now. She's seen a nurse in the NHS. She's definitely the exact same thing to stand up for herself. But I must point out the concept of the magic money tree. I wish we heard that term when it came to going after COVID fraud. £35 billion was what that cost us. Is what that cost us.
It's a very large magic money tree. That one.
That was a very large magic money tree or so. Or when we look at, say, the cost of Brexit, £40 billion a year or so. It looks like we're able to
spend it twice. It's spent. It's gone. And of course, will do a much better job. But it's spent, and that's the debt that we're dealing with.
Fraud must be reclawed. When something has been taken fraud must be reclawed and must be punished effectively. In the same way in which we punish that kid, or say in 2011, who stole a bottle of bottle of mineral water from a burning building and sent it to prison for 6 months. People who walked away with millions upon billions or so, many of them in the Conservative Party. These are the rich criminals who you alluded to often get away with these things.
Look,
we have to go after them.
Listen. It's spent. It's gone. You can't get it back, and it's peanuts compared with the amount of money that it costs to run the health service.
It's not been spent on nothing. There are people who we don't like. I don't want to name names right now. So we can seize yachts, we can seize houses, we can seize mansions, we can go do many different things. The British state can be very effective at pursuing fraudulent activity and pursuing people who have defrauded the British state. Very effective. We want to be very aggressive, and we should be doing that right now because we need the money.
Of course, we are doing it. We do it. And be my guest, but it ain't going to close the gap, and it ain't going to make it possible to pay 1.3 million NHS workers better than the government is already offering. That's the point.
I don't think. A final thing I'll say, not final thing I'll say, I'll talk as long as I'm invited to, but I'll say this too, that I found it interesting that Keir Starmer made pensioners and made the poor in the society pay for the black hole, as they called it, in our budget. Particularly to fund and also to cut aid budgets in order to actually fund the war efforts or so, to fund potential to remilitarize Britain, to rearm Britain or so. I think that would have been a time that a Labour government, a Labour Prime Minister, genuine old school Labour Prime Minister would have leaned into patriotic duty of the wealthy in our society and turned around and said, look, guys, now is the time where when the good times are here, you do very well out of them. You will still do well out of them, but we need you to patriotically contribute to the underlying to the efforts of Britain right now, as opposed to leaving our pensions.
It sounds as if you think they don't. By far the largest amount of income tax that comes in actually comes from the richest 1%. And of course, the trouble is, if you keep taxing them, I mean, if you had stayed as a banker, you would understand this. I suspect that if you keep taxing the rich,
I was always happy to pay tax.
If you keep taxing the rich, they are very mobile people. If you remove the non-doms, the non-dom concession, what they do is they leave. And when they leave, they take with them both their tax-paying ability, their employment ability, and their brains. You may not like that,
I'm so sorry to interrupt, Edwina. This is fascinating stuff, but I'm afraid we'll just have to leave it there. We have to come up with the news. Coming up next, Edwina, Currie and Nels Abbey, thank you very much.